Hey everybody, JC here, Friday evening, August 26th. I told you I'd make another tropical update video, so here we are. Now there is no tropical landfall threat to New Jersey or surrounding areas. I'm only making this video if you have friends or family down in southern Florida or along the Gulf Coast. Anywhere from Galveston, Texas to the Florida panhandle is sort of in play here for tropical impact, potential tropical impact. So let's go right to Gaston. And it does look like Gaston, or Gaston, however you say that, is going to make a hard turn to the northeast. And it will not be impacting Bermuda, aside from some heavier surf and possibly an outer band of clouds and a sprinkle maybe. But for the most part, I think Bermuda's okay now. If you are cruising towards Bermuda, you might experience some rougher seas, but these cruise boats know how to avoid that, as long as it's not this past January. But, you'll be fine, okay? We're fine. We're fine here, right? So, no impacts from Gaston. Now, Invest 99L is probably the most talked about invest I've ever seen. We've been tracking this thing for 10 days now. It's been slow and weak, and we just don't know if it's going to intensify or fizzle out. Just when it starts showing signs of dying, it comes back to life, and it's been sort of a forecasting nightmare, however, a pretty educational process. So this is the tropical spaghetti, and as you can see, there's pretty strong agreement in this passage between Cuba and Florida. Now, let's look at the wind animation at the surface for a minute. Where I have this circle right here is where the current low-level circulation is trying to form. It has not formed yet and therefore cannot graduate to a tropical depression. As soon as it does close off completely, it will be graduated to a depression status. But as of now, this is still just a wave or an invest. Last night, a low-level circulation formed right around here and moved off towards Cuba overnight. And there was no convection on top of it. It was just an open wave. Earlier this morning, earlier this morning, another low-level circulation formed near the Crooked Island Long Key here. And today it's right here where the circle is. So this is almost like a brand new storm, kind of. Just getting going. However, this line here, this curve, represents the entire tropical wave. So it is still a tropical wave, and we have low-level circulation trying to form, and now we have some convection in this area. But let's talk about that convection for a minute. Yesterday, when the storm was sort of here, you had your cyclonic flow around it. Hispaniola was blocking that flow. And these mountains are 10,000 feet. They're volcanic, very high, and they disrupt the wind in the sense that the air goes up the mountain as it comes here and then falls down the other side of the mountain. As it falls, it dries everything out. And that's why this system has been kept weak, because it's been dealing with a lot of that dry air. Today, now that it's here, for most of the day, there has been a pathway for that flow to come in. And all this water down here is extremely warmer, closer to the equator. So it has this sort of thread-the-needle inflow from the southeast, and it's allowed convection to blow up in this area. You can see this convection on infrared satellite. It's getting a little too late for visible satellite. The sun's kind of setting out here already, but infrared allows us to see it at night. So you can see all these white blobs. Those are thunderstorms that have been firing all day from that inflow between Haiti and Cuba. So, now that there's a little bit more moist air into play, we have to talk about the other inhibiting factor, which is shear. A shear is simple. Vertical shear is a change in wind direction over altitude. So if you have 20-mile-an-hour winds at the surface out of the east and 20-mile-an-hour winds at 500 millibars out of the west, that's a 40-mile-an-hour difference from the surface up to that altitude. So you can say that there is 40 miles an hour of shear. And shear is a weakening factor for tropical cyclones. It just doesn't play well. Hurricanes like to see those mid and upper level winds all in the same direction so it can steer the storm as it intensifies. It does not like to see change in wind direction as you go upwards in altitude. So this system has been continuously fighting dry air, first from the Saharan desert when it came across the Atlantic, and now from what's called the downsloping that I mentioned before off of these islands. It's been battling all that dry air, and yesterday and most of today it's been battling that shear just to the north of it. That's why this is still not closed off. It is still just a weak wave. So here we are, and as we move forward, we have basically three scenarios here. Does this system pass more over southern Florida and the Keys? Does it pass a little more southerly near Cuba, or does it thread the needle right between? All right, so if it passes over the Keys in southern Florida, it's probably gonna hook up here towards, Tampa and the panhandle hook here. If it passes between Florida and Cuba, it'll kind of go out maybe towards Louisiana, Fort Walton, extreme western Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, that whole area right there. If it hits Cuba, it could stay so weak that it floats over here towards, maybe even Galveston, Texas. So that's why I say everyone from Galveston over to the Florida Panhandle and a little bit down the Florida West Coast should be paying attention to this. So let's talk about repercussions of track. If it passes closer to Cuba, Cuba has elevations as well. They're 6,000 feet. They're not as high as Hispaniola, which has 10,000 foot elevations, but 6,000 feet is still pretty high. It could create some of that dry downsloping that we saw with Hispaniola. If that were the case, the wave will likely just stay very, very weak here and float into the Gulf. Now, once it's in the Gulf, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the system not blowing up into a hurricane or possibly major hurricane, because this water's all 90 degrees, 86 to 90 degrees, and dew points are off the chart, so it's nothing but tropical cyclone fuel in here. So it wouldn't take much of a wave to make it out of here to re-intensify. So we're watching that very closely. If the system passes over Florida, it might deal with a little more shear out here and, sort of hook up around that departing East Coast ridge. That would keep it weaker, but it would bring a substantial amount of rainfall to southern Florida and possibly points north in Florida and even around in the Panhandle. If the system passes between the two, right between the Keys and Florida, then it will likely stay stronger. I don't want to say strong, but just stronger than if it had to deal with Cuba or the Keys in Florida. And that would be the scenario we have to watch out for, because then you might have a tropical depression, maybe even approaching a tropical storm criteria system here, going into this very warm and moist water. So those are sort of the three possibilities. Now, if you draw a line right here, beyond this, I can't tell you what's going to happen. I don't know. It could really do anything. So I'm really focused between where it is right now and that line that I drew right here. And this is going to be over the next 24 to 48 hours. So we need to watch if this system sort of goes due west or more of a west-northwest track. So that's what I'm going to be focused on here. And if it looks like it's going to slowly intensify like it's been doing today and go right through the middle, then once it gets here, it might be time to sound some alarms up in this region here. But we're not there yet. I can't make a forecast track for this storm. It's just too difficult. It's too weak. There's too many possibilities. But I can tell you live observations. Things like, yes, the convection is firing, and it's actually starting to try to wrap around that low-level circulation that is here, just north of eastern Cuba. I can tell you that, and I can tell you that the ridge doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere. It's going to stay, over the east coast, anywhere from Outer Banks down through South Carolina, and that's going to be the main steering current that takes this system west or west-northwest. I can tell you that the shear ends kind of here. The northerly shear has been coming this way, but as soon as this system gets about another 50 to 100 miles to the west or west-northwest, it's going to be out of that shear environment. This storm's been battling 25 to 35 knots of shear yesterday, and that's too much for a wave to form. Where it's at right now is about 10 to 15 knots, which is, weaker shear, but it's just still not there yet. Once the system gets into this area, you're talking about 5 to 10 knots of shear, which is nothing. At that point, the low might be closed off, and it'll be over 86 to 90 degree water. So I know this is a lot to process. So let me try to break it down in English. Okay. Here we are today. This storm's going to be somewhere here Sunday. And if it's closer to Florida, you'll see more rain in Florida. Nothing you haven't seen before down there. Most Florida scoffs at activity this week. But it will be a lot of rainfall. And if it's closer to Cuba, then it'll just be weakening. If it's right down the middle, then I think the Gulf Coast should be on lookout. And any sort of impact here wouldn't be until probably Wednesday, give or take 12 hours. So what I think I'll do is I'll make another video Sunday night when this system is right around here. And we will, see what we're working with. So let me just check my notes here, make sure I didn't miss anything. No, I think I've covered it all. So, look, don't panic. Never a reason to panic. Florida, you're going to be okay. It might rain a lot. If it does form a tropical storm, again, you laugh at that. Gulf Coast, stay tuned. I'll be making another video on Sunday. So everybody have a great weekend, and please be safe.